In today's episode of the Pathfunk Presents podcast, I have an interesting guest here with me today. I'm with Tameka Bazile, and she's sailing over from the team at Jambb, and they're really working on something super exciting. They're sort of at the intersection of NFTs, comedy, and much more. And I really want to sort of dive into that with Tameka today. She's a senior marketing manager at the team, and today we want to hear more about Jambb. So Tameka, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Lucas.
Of course. Maybe give us, a 360 overview. What is Jambb all about?
Yeah, so Jambb is an NFT project that focuses on digital comedy collectibles. So we've had a few drops in the past with some really big names in American comedy, Hannibal Buress. We've worked with Ian Edwards, Beth Stelling, some real front runners in comedy to digitize and create NFT collectibles that are hosted on the Flow blockchain. These collectibles allow fans and super fans to collect and own moments from their favorite jokes and bits. They're able to exchange them on our marketplace. But the biggest element here is that these NFT collectibles give you access and utility outside of the digital space. So perks in the form of tickets to a show or even a physical element. We've had comedians sign things and kind of send them to fans and things of that nature. So it's a really great way for you to increase your exposure to some of your favorite comedians.
Makes a lot of sense. Maybe tell us a little bit more about sort of, the people that are leveraging Jambb. Like, who is this? You mentioned super fans. Is that, how do people hear about it? Who is basically, a typical user of Jambb?
Yeah, that's a great question. So our audience is actually diversified into three distinct spaces. So we have our NFT enthusiasts, right? And these are the folks who are well-versed in the NFT space. They're looking for projects that they want to connect to. We do attract a percentage of folks who are very, very well-versed in the NFT space. They are collectors and traders from other major projects such as NBA Top Shot, Eternals, and they're ultimately attracted to the culture and what Jambb is doing as a whole. So those are going to be our NFT enthusiasts. But then on the other side, we have our comedy enthusiasts who are investing time in Jambb because they're connected to the comedians that we've worked with. A big element to what we do over at Jambb is protecting the sanctity of comedy through IP rights. So with the initiation of the pandemic, we know everyone was kind of thrust inside, and comedy took a big hit, especially stand-up comedy, because stand-up comedians require physical presence in order to be able to deliver in ways that allow them to connect with their fans. And in seeing that discrepancy, we knew that there was going to be a need for comedy fans to really be able to connect with their favorite comedians in a way that was decentralized and kind of takes a step back from having to attend a comedy show physically, or even having to connect with their favorite comedian online via social media, which we know was a really big element during the pandemic as well. So those are going to be two of our top audiences that we connect with. But since our inception, we actually have been able to acquire a third audience, which I like to call our Jamb stands. And they are the folks who are very much just tied to Jamb as a company and what it is that we do. We've created an amazing comedic culture in our Discord and in our Twitter, and we have been able to generate an audience that is very connected to the project in and of itself and participates in almost every drop that we put out.
Very cool. I would really love today in the conversation also deep dive a little bit in that community building aspect, because I think a lot of marketers becoming very interested in the NFT space has been sort of on the forefront of that. But before we dive into that, maybe first thing, how do people hear about the Jambb projects? Maybe tell me a little bit about that.
So most of the time, folks hear about Jambb for the first time, unless you are an NFT enthusiast, in which you would hear about us via other blockchain projects on Twitter. We have a very active community of NFT enthusiasts on Twitter. But most of the time, you hear about Jambb through our partnership with our comedians. So contractually, what we do is we either run original productions with our comedians, and we have them advertise the original production. But ultimately, their fans get to know us through their advertisement of our future drop in partnership with them. And that is ultimately what increases their intake into the Jambb ecosystem.
That makes sense. And what role do you think the website plays? Because, for many marketers, the website is key, but
Yeah.
potentially the NFT space moves slightly different. Maybe tell me
Yeah.
about sort of the role of the website.
I would have to say that the website is a very key player, even in the NFT space, especially when it comes to tying back the cultural elements of why this project exists. Because a lot of NFT projects are actually appealing to the mainstream, Jamb is appealing to the mainstream in the sense that we work with comedians and are lobbying their established audience to come and invest in digital collectibles. Our website is a really big element to conversion because it helps us to communicate why this project exists, what it does to actually support comedy and support the comedians in the long run. And it helps to educate the mainstream audience in why decentralization, blockchain, and NFTs are the way for us to be able to move that needle forward for comedians. So without that and without copy that converts in that way, the mainstream is they're not well equipped to understand why does it have to show up in this format and why is blockchain the best way to deliver this.
Now, I would love now to sort of dive deeper a little bit into the community. Like, what do you think marketers, because a lot of marketers build up communities, but sometimes they stale also those communities. Like, what have you guys learned? What makes a lively community? What is actually sort of, aspects that you think are really important to keep that community alive?
Yeah, well, for any NFT project, the community is actually going to be one of the most important parts. As a marketer in the NFT space, I'm a firm believer that the community is actually what drives an NFT project. Without a thriving community that is engaged, believes in your messaging, your project can very easily fail. So our community not only increases access to the comedians, but it also gives us an opportunity to connect with them as to what it is that they enjoy within the NFT space, get to know what types of comedy that they might want. And ultimately it goes through and feeding the Jamb ecosystem because it lets us understand what does our community want to see come out of our product? What do they want to see come out of our marketplace? What sort of comedians do they want to see us work with? And it increases the chances of success for the project because we are directly connecting with our community and listening to what it is that they want and letting them drive the direction of the project overall.
Super interesting. Okay, and you found basically what I'm curious then to learn is once we now talked about the community and we talked about growth in the NFT space. I would like to switch gears a little bit and talk about you as a marketer a little bit, because the NFT space is, actually interesting for marketers because for many of them, it's probably quite new, right? To be active as a marketer in there.
Yes.
Like, how do you keep on educating yourself for, what it takes to be, a marketer in the NFT space? Is there any resources, any places, where marketers in the NFT space come together? Maybe share a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. I find that anyone's success in the NFT space means that you have to immerse yourself in the NFT space. We have some amazing communities on social. DAOs are also going to be a really great way for you to get involved in the NFT space. But I think what a lot of people don't realize when it comes to NFTs, blockchain, crypto overall, is that these are largely established communities. And we also have very large conferences where we can go and connect with other frontrunners in the communities, artists who are creating their own individual NFTs. I have previously attended NFT NYC last year, and most recently came back from LA just a week ago for NFT LA, and I plan to attend NFT NYC again this upcoming June. But it's just a great place for us to be able to connect with other frontrunners in the NFT space, learn more about our processes, learn from other marketers, really be able to bounce ideas off of each other, and really give us a clear idea as to like, we are here, even though the NFT space is still very new. And I think that we are still very much in the first steps of Web3. It's amazing how established a lot of these spaces actually are, and how they are able to create connection between the professionals that work in them.
Very cool. To wrap it up, I have some rapid fire questions to get to know you a little bit better.
Let's go. Yeah, absolutely.
What's the last book you read or the last podcast you listened to?
Oh, the last book I read or the last podcast I listened to. It's funny. I both love and hate this question because I try to read to disconnect. So I'm very much a fantasy reader,
Mhm.
young adult novels. I grew up on Harry Potter. So when I read to kind of escape this world completely.
That's good.
So that has been a really big element. But the last podcast I listened to was actually the Pathmark podcast. How could I have come here and not have been prepared for what type of interviewer you might be, just how I might connect with you. And it's actually a really big element as to why I chose to move forward with the Pathmark podcast, because it has been a really great source of knowledge for me as well.
Very
So
cool.
I've been happy to listen to it as well.
Very cool. What is one single thing your company is focused on the most at the moment?
What is one single thing that we are focused on the most at the moment? Is really, really utilizing our community to its fullest extent, but also establishing a brand strategy that helps us communicate our value in the NFT space. A big element of NFTs is you want your community to trust you. It is still largely new to everyone in the space and even outside of the space, and establishing trust means transparency and opening the lines of communication with you and your community. And that's been a very, very big element of what we've been focusing on at Jamb thus far.
There would be no boundaries in tech. What's the one thing you would fix for your role today?
One thing I would fix for my role today, oh my goodness. Everything is a learning aspect. And we know we're marketers. We function off of data. We function off of being able to interpret what we're seeing in front of us. But Web3 and NFTs are just so entirely new that everything you put forth is entirely new and entirely nuanced. You could have as many Web2 tactics and strategies floating around in your mind as possible, and only a portion of them will work the way you want them to in the Web3 space. So we are redefining what marketing looks like overall in Web3. And it's both an exciting and a very frustrating place to be in at the same time. As a marketer, sometimes I really, really want quick wins, and it's just not a thing in Web3. But it's a learning opportunity, and it's a sense to really reestablish something new in the marketing space. And I think being a front runner in that element is a really big reason why I stay and why I'm so committed to it.
For the last question, I would like to do a bit of time travel. Let's go back to the days of Rutgers Graduate School of Education, if you allow.
Yeah.
Right? So you're heading out of formal education into the world of, language, marketing, you've been a business owner as well, business writing. So what's the one advice you would give yourself for your journey?
Start your personal brand sooner. My personal brand has been exceptional to my career trajectory, to the types of opportunities that I attract, to the types of people that I've seen, whether I work in the NFT space or I'm just a marketer. If there's anything that I can tell budding marketers, folks who are leaving their formal education, is as we extend into Web3, personal branding and being able to represent yourself in the online space is going to be, bar none, one of the most important elements that you can establish for yourself as a professional. As I think a Web2 concept is focusing on resumes and cover letters to really articulate our value. And Web3 is the decentralization of a lot of what we have put forth thus far. And one of those things is going to be how we establish our value and taking ownership of our own narrative by establishing personal brands. So yes, I wish I could tell 22-year-old Tameka to get online, get on LinkedIn right now. I didn't actually start establishing my LinkedIn personal brand until last year. I was most active on Instagram beforehand. But yeah, I would tell myself immediately, get on LinkedIn and start establishing your personal brand, because it's going to be a game changer.
Awesome. Tameka, appreciate you took the time with us today to be a guest on Pathmark Presents. I want to give you the very last word. If somebody would be forgetting all that we discussed about Jambb, what's the one thing they should remember?
Laughter. Jamb is all about increasing the opportunity to laugh. We're coming off of a pandemic. The world is a difficult place to navigate right now. And if there's one thing that you can remember about Jamb, is that we will always prioritize laughter, especially in spaces of darkness, and a place for our community to be able to connect through what makes them happy.
Thanks a lot for being a guest on Pathmark Presents.
Thank you for having me.